Hi, it's great to be here. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for joining. So, how would you describe your day-to-day lifestyle?
Oh my God. Well, variable. It doesn't have any sort of like program to it, but basically I'm a super active person. I really enjoy spending time outside, and when I absolutely have to, I do a little bit of work as well.
Your Instagram handle is Food Fitness Flora, so that covers quite a lot of different aspects. So, when did you start this account and what inspired it?
So I actually started my Instagram about 13 years ago. So a really long time ago, back at the very beginning of things that weren't Bebo. And it basically was initially it was to document my recovery from an eating disorder. And actually, it wasn't even about me, it was about the food that I was eating. And I kind of just was taking pictures of my food to show my doctor and prove that I was having full portion size and that sort of stuff. And I as with many people who have eating disorders, was completely obsessed with food. But it did have some positives in that I got really into cooking and learning about our bodies and macro and micronutrients and the importance of that, but also like what flavors work together. And I was really interested in doing a lot of cooking. So that's where the food part started. So not the healthiest start, but it turned into something that was really positive for me. And the community that I found on social media was amazing. I mean, this is before trolls, because like no one was on social media at that time, and certainly no one had made it into a career or a business or whatever. And then I moved away from food after a while. You know, I started recovering. It started to become less of an obsession for me, and I was documenting. At that point, then playing squash. So I played national schools championships in squash at the age of 17. So I was just kind of documenting my training for that. But yeah, it kind of just went basically as I changed different sports and as I changed what I was doing. So from GCSEs to A levels to taking a year out and working in Paris and Germany to going to university, it's kind of followed me the whole way through all of that and the various different sports that I've taken up in that time as well.
Yeah, of course. No, that's really interesting. And how has it developed then from when you joined 13 years ago? How would you say that your Instagram is now, like the content that you produce? Has that changed a lot, or is it the same core values?
It's very much the same core values. I have very little interest in coming across a certain way on social media. It's always sort of been a kind of diary for me. Not in the like a dear diary, today I did this, but it's I don't try to curate the way that I appear on social media. I find that a lot more tiring than just appearing as I am, which is slightly like not necessarily pre-planned or whatever. So I just share my training, share my day to day, share the things that I'm interested in, which is very much not just sports. I try to share things about sustainability, about conservation, about biology, which is what my background's in. Really a little bit of everything, actually.
I think being authentic online is such a challenge, but also it's natural when you actually think about it, but you have to be really conscious of it, don't you?
Yeah, absolutely. I think especially when I was a little bit younger, it's really easy to get caught up in doing what you think you should be doing. And I definitely still fall into that trap from time to time. And actually, invariably, that content does worse than when I'm just being my authentic self. And some of the things that I have posted in the spur of the moment because I'm upset or angry or excited about something, that's the content that performs the best. You know, it's not pre-planned, it's not curated, it's very much me being my authentic self. And I think there's something to learn from that. And somehow 13 years later I still don't necessarily learn that lesson. But primarily it's just, yeah, things that I'm interested in.
Yeah, and how do you think that this social media has changed the fitness industry? Do you think it's been positive or negative?
I think it's been both, and I think it depends on where you're coming from. I mean, if you're a fitness trainer, for example, you have a huge sort of it's an indefinite audience. You know, there's so many people out there who are interested in fitness partly because of what they have seen on social media, and that was definitely the way with me. You know, I played sports, but I only got into going to the gym, for example, when Kayla Itsinas came out with her bikini body guide, which anyone who was around 15, 16, 2017 social media will have been probably aware of, if not actually using. And yeah, so social media has really allowed people to feel like they're part of a fitness community,
Mhm.
which, I mean, unless you live in a major city and were already going to gyms or fitness clubs or classes or whatever, you wouldn't necessarily have had that. And like as someone who now runs by myself, it's really lovely to have that online community of runners, and the running community is super sweet. Like I think there's so many great people out there, and it's really encouraging to have. On the downside, of course, you've got all the misinformation. Like there is so much misinformation, so much crap out there, that it is sort of soul destroying to read day in day out, and read people also in the comment section regurgitating things that they've read on some sort of Jordan Peterson whatever. And it's very frustrating as someone who comes from a science background to be like, could you just like maybe read a research paper? But of course people don't. People look at people who are influential on social media and assume that people's follower number equates to their intelligence or their knowledge on a particular subject. And of course that's not true. If I started talking about quantum mechanics, just because I've got over 100,000 followers, it doesn't mean that I know anything about quantum mechanics. And I think there are lots of very charismatic people on social media, but again, charisma doesn't necessarily equate to your knowledge or even wanting to do good. So yeah, there's two different sides to it. And luckily with social media, especially things like Instagram, you can curate your feed to be people who are a positive influence on you. And that's something that I really recommend people do. Like you don't have to follow people just because other people are following them. You should follow people who make you feel good, who make you laugh, who educate you, that sort of stuff. Yeah, so it's kind of up to you who you follow.
I think that's such a new phenomenon as well, in a way that people are saying, like, if you don't like my content, just unfollow me, and giving people the power to have the confidence to do that. Because
Yeah.
before it was like everyone had to follow the main fitness influencers. I remember a few years ago with the triangle bikini when they were like the coolest thing ever. And then there was a huge impact on a lot of people who didn't have the triangle bikini body. And then people were like, you can just unfollow them. And suddenly it was like, wow, it just lifted people out of that
Yeah,
mentality.
absolutely. And I think it's really important to take control over the content that you're bringing in. Like day to day, you can avoid people you don't like. It's the same online. Sometimes they'll come and find you, and that's not great. That's bullying and harassment. But if you can avoid following them, then that's a good step towards improving your own mental health. That you do have the power to do that.
Being an ultra runner and having that presence on your social media, do you feel pressure to correct things that you see that people are saying that isn't necessarily right? Or like you're talking about, you come from the science background of it. Do you feel like an overwhelming pressure? Are you able to let go and just maintain your area of social media?
It depends, I think, what it is and where it is. If it's on my social media and if someone's spouting anti-science rhetoric, then yes, I'm gonna kind of maybe message them and be like, look, I appreciate that maybe you don't believe Western science or like the way where I'm coming from, but please don't put it on my page. If you want to put it on your own page, that's absolutely fine. Or if it's actually going to harm people, then I might have something to say. I try to stay out of most things, to be honest, because there is so much out there that it's a never ending job if you think it's your duty to correct everyone on social media. And also, I don't know everything. I'm not necessarily right about everything that I think I'm right about. And even within my degree, the science has changed on that as well since I left university. And while I try to keep up with lots of different things, it doesn't necessarily mean that I know everything. And I'm very aware of, my own fallibility, and always happy to learn. So I'm always erring on the side of caution that, like, if I put something out there, I better be sure that it's right, because otherwise, not only am I not educating people, but I'm also coming across as a complete idiot. So I do try and stay out of it if I'm not 100% sure. But yeah, I mean, it's a bit of a balancing act, and it totally depends like where that education is coming from. If I have said something that is incorrect, or that the science has changed on, or that the science is maybe a little bit wishy-washy on, I try to share either both viewpoints, or just say like it is thought that X, Y, and Z, or science suggests that whatever. Because as anyone who studied science will know, science is not about proving things. It's kind of about disproving alternative theories. So you've got the most likely theory that kind of comes to the fore. So yeah, you don't know a lot of things, but you kind of assume certain things.
And what would you say are the key factors that have led you to where you are in life you were always sporty, but were you destined to be an ultra runner?
No, no. I also wasn't always sporty. I was, as anyone who's listened to kind of any podcast that I've done before, I was very much, let's say, I was not good at school sports, and I'm not very much a team sports player. I am a team player, but not in the sports world because I'm far too competitive. And if things go wrong, I want it to be something that I personally can fix. And if things go right, I like to take the credit, which you can't do in a team sport because it's very much about the team. So, no, I wasn't always sporty, but I kind of realized that it was actually only school sports that I was really bad at. And actually, when it comes to being active and fit as a whole, I was really interested in that. Like I was really interested in going outside and hiking and, just basically being on my feet all day and being out in nature. And that school sports don't really allow for that. They're kind of much more about netball and hockey and rounders or whatever, tennis and that kind of stuff, all of which I'm not very good at. I can't even remember your question. I feel like that wasn't it.
What are the factors that have led you to where you are in life?
Oh yeah, and would I always be an ultra runner? No. So I don't know. I think I was very lucky to start Instagram when I did, and very lucky that Instagram happened to be the social media that took off. That's pure luck, and because of that, I am doing the job that I do today, which is full-time social media, full-time content creation. So it's split between Instagram, TikTok, YouTube. I also write for various publications, and I wouldn't have been able to do all of that if I wasn't on Instagram at the very beginning of when it started, and that's allowed me to do what I do now. Ultra running, I very much doubt I would have got into ultra running on my own without social media. That's not to say I don't love it, but it's because I think social media, this is another of those positive impacts that social media can have. It made me believe that running 50 kilometers was not all that, it's kind of easy. Everyone does it. But it turns out it's just everyone on my social media feed does it. And in everyday life, people think it's kind of insane. But because I was looking at so many amazing men and women, and especially the women, because I was looking at so many amazing people doing, this and a lot more, I kind of got into it thinking, yeah, sure, why not? Like, it's just a thing that people do. People seem to really enjoy it. I might as well try it. And I did my first ultra marathon in lockdown, towards the end of lockdown in the Peak District. And I couldn't have had a better time. Like, I was not trained for it at all. I hadn't trained to do an ultra marathon. I signed up with 2 weeks to go and just went out there and just had a blast. Like, I really genuinely had the best time. And it is kind of coincidence that that's now what I talk about. I was already talking about running bits and bobs, but yeah, ultra marathons are a relatively new thing for me, and I don't know, I'm constantly moving, my interests and all that kind of stuff, but so long as it's active and it's outdoors, I'm all for it.
The Peak District's probably quite a hard ultra run to start off with. That's a lot of hills.
It is a lot of hills, but I was previously on the Southwest Coast Path, so like it's very different hills. Southwest Coast Path doesn't go above a couple of 100 meters at all, ever, but it's constantly up and down. Whereas obviously the
famous
Peak,
undulating.
yes,
Fine.
exactly. It is literally undulate. I mean, it's endless. But then going to the Peak District, you're going up for an hour, whatever, 700 meters or something, and then you can come down for a really long time as well. And that was really fun for me because you get a little bit of a different vibe to what you get on the Southwest Coast Path, but it's still absolutely beautiful. And like for me, exploring, just getting out there and exploring wherever I am is what makes me really happy. So it was just like, I don't know, 6 hours of just having the best time of my life.
Well, I think it's fair to say that the Beverleys are quite a high performance family. I mean, you're an ultra runner, you've got a really successful social media account, you're a fitness model, you're a fitness influencer, your sister Grace runs several businesses. How does that dynamic play out? Are you guys competitive with each other in the same industry?
No, I mean, let's also bear in mind I've got two other sisters as well, so there are four of us total, which I think people forget about, the secret sisters that are not so much on social media, although the youngest one definitely is as well. I mean, everyone's on social media, right? So like it would be slightly unfair to be like really competitive about just being on social media. No, I mean, Grace started up her account a couple of years after I did, and we were both initially in the same part of the industry, you know, weightlifting, Kayla Etzina's BBG, you know, that sort of stuff. But we have our own interests, and Grace is a business owner, and I have zero interest in running a business because I'm not, I don't know, I kind of just want to give things away. And like that's
Your
what makes
business
a
strategy.
terrible business. Really, genuinely. And she is so good at what she does, but I have zero interest in doing what she does. So it actually works out, you know, really well. And also, like, I think people don't see us necessarily communicating on social media, but that's because we're communicating in person all
Yeah.
the time. I think people assume that you play out your family dynamics in the public eye if you're in the public eye, but that's just not true. That couldn't be like further from the truth. We prefer to actually like catch up in person and
Like a normal family. People
like
forget
a normal, like normal people. Exactly. We had an amazing dinner last
that.
week. Sweet. Like it's really nice. They all live in London and I live in Bristol. So when we do catch up, it's like proper. We're having dinner until like, I don't know, midnight or something. I went to bed. I'm like a 9:30 going to bed, 10 p.m. asleep sort of gal. And I was like, I just can't hack this. Tough.
You're a fitness model, and I was just wondering what it's like to be a model in the fitness industry.
Well, much better than it used to be. That is for sure. Previously, I first started modeling when I joined the agency that I'm currently with, which is W Model Management. They specialize in fitness and active people. They do have a fashion division and various other divisions as well. But I originally joined them, and the first couple of castings that I went to, I got comments on having big boobs, not common in the fitness industry, having muscles, apparently also not common in the fitness modeling industry, saying that I looked a little bit too big, a little bit too hench to be doing the modeling that they wanted, which, as someone who is actually sporty and actually into lifting the weights that they want me to lift on set, blows my mind, because what they want is what they wanted in the past was someone who is super skinny but looked like they were lifting weights. And that is a kind of hangover from the heroin chic era of what the epitome of female attractiveness is. Whereas now, thank God, they are very much moving more towards people who are actually doing the sports that they are portraying. Quite often we'll get a casting through being like, who does X sport? You know, they don't want someone pretending to swing a golf stick, whatever. I don't play golf, so obviously I'm not the one who's going to be doing these. What is it? A golf
Golf club.
club?
Yeah, don't do a golf one.
Scientist, not a golfer. Anyway, they will not just get a model to swing the golf stick. They will get an actual golfer to go in and do it, and who just so happens to look amazing whilst doing it. And it's the same with running. I think some brands in the past, namely Asics, I think a couple of other ones, have got in trouble from using fashion models for fitness shoots who have terrible running form or look like, you know, they couldn't continue for a mile or whatever whilst doing a shoot about marathon training or something. And it's problematic because there are so many people out there who love the brand, use the brand, are actual marathon runners, and also look amazing doing it, that would be very much better to use in that shoot. And in the past, they haven't done that. So the trend is towards using actually fit people for the sports that they're portraying, and that makes me really happy. I do loads of different sports, so I mostly get jobs in like hiking and running, of course, especially trail running, which is like, even if you get a road runner and you stick them on the top of a mountain, you ask them to run trails, like they're gonna really struggle with that, and it's gonna show. You know, with modeling, you need to look relaxed and chill and happy. What you don't want to be doing is going like in your photos, because that's going to come across, especially in video. You really need to look like you know what you're doing. And so yeah, thankfully they're actually choosing people who actually do the sports, and there are a lot of us out there, so it's moving in the right direction. But at the beginning it was pretty soul destroying.
It's wild that that's a thing, that it has to be like, yeah, that they're actually now picking people who do the sport. You would think when you say it like that, that's so obvious. But
It makes so much sense.
if you have someone who you're doing a cycling shoot and they've never been on a bike before, you're going to be able to tell, do you know? And also the muscle groups that you train for weightlifting or trail running or cycling or swimming, like they're all so different, and you
Yeah,
can really tell that. And I think that's a beauty of the sport as well. If you're an aspiring swimmer and you want to have build up that muscle, and then you see, an endurance cyclist doing a swim shoot, it's not going to look pretty.
exactly.
In that term, you need to be inspirational, which I guess, would you say that's a huge part of modeling as well, to inspire people to start the sport?
I guess so. I mean, modeling has obviously the reputation of being completely vapid and lacking any sort of substance whatsoever. And in a way, sometimes it is still that. But I think a lot of brands, more modern brands as well, the smaller things, the smaller brands that are coming along now, really targeting people who are very much in one particular sport, they're really good because often they'll use elite or ex-elite athletes, gymnasts for gymnastics stuff, and trail runners who are professionals for their trail running shoots, and that's inspiring. I think Lauren Fleshman in her book, what is it called? Ooh, I really want to remember this now. Good for a Girl, an amazing book, which I thoroughly recommend that anyone listens to or reads. I was listening to it on my runs recently, and it's absolutely incredible. But she was talking about when she started to become like a Nike ambassador, started to get sponsored by Nike, and they would be using fashion models for their fitness shoots. And she came along and she was like, guys, you're paying us a yearly retainer to be here. We have endless amounts of like public appearances. Why don't you just use us for those shoots? And they were like, well, that's not aspirational for people. We want people to think that they can look like these guys. And she was a bit like, hang on a second, but we're the ones who people want to be like. We're the ones who are competing on an international stage. Surely that's more inspirational and aspirational than some fashion model that no one's ever seen before. Um, and let me just say, there's nothing wrong with being a fashion model, but I think brands have got this very wrong historically. Anyway, they ended up using her and the other Nike ambassadors, and originally still were trying to do it in a way that was like sexualizing women. And Lauren, she is incredible. She was like, why don't I just wear the gear that I already wear, which is already Nike, for the shoot to look like I'm doing the training that I already do? Like, surely that's going to come across better than me posing in like zero clothes and just wearing your shoes. That's not what women want to see. Like,
Yeah.
that's not what sells clothes. And I think slowly, slowly people are realizing that.
And what current goals are you working towards in your running?
So I have a big goal at the end of summer, at the end of September. I'm doing a 225-kilometer ultra marathon in 5 days on the Swedish high coast, which I'm very excited for, actually terrified for also. I've never run that far before. I've run a 4-day, 173-kilometer race or run. That was last year. I've done some 3-day stuff and lots of 2-day stuff, but I've never done 5 days in a row. And the last 4-day thing left me battered and broken. So we'll see. And a month before that, I'm going out to UTMB week to do OCC, which I'm super excited for as well, which is 55 kilometers in the French Alps. And actually, I think in Switzerland and various other places as well. I think you're crossing borders in that one. But yeah, that's at the end of August, and I'm very excited for that as well.
A big summer then. So a 225-kilometer race over 5 days, how does that look? Are you carrying your tent with you up? Do you camp out? Do you get any sleep? Tell us
Yeah,
a bit about the structure.
so it completely varies in different races. Some of them are run through until you get to the end. In other ones, they're stage races, which is what this is. So you have a set distance to do each day. And once you finish that distance, you set up camp and you sleep there, which thank God this one is, because I can't deal with a lack of sleep. And whilst there is a lack of sleep in this because of having some really early starts, you do at least get like a set amount of time to rest and recover at the end of every day. And the faster you are, the more recovery you get. So there is that aspect of like not wanting to be out there for too long, but equally not wanting to waste all your energy on days 1 and 2 so that you don't have any for the latter half, the latter stages of the race. You don't carry your tent, you don't carry your food in this one. You only have to carry the food and water that you're taking for that day. And there are aid stations on the way around that you can top up your water at as well. So it's one of the more accessible 225-kilometer races out there, which I realize feels like an oxymoron, but there is so much support. So actually, if you can't, and the great thing about it is it's not actually a race, it's a charity raising mission. I do have a Just Giving page if you fancy donating. It's going to get me through my training, so I would really appreciate that if anyone can. But it's basically to raise funds for ending modern day slavery for the Tribe Freedom Foundation. And because of that, it's not a race. So if you can't finish one day, they're not going to kick you out. You can still start the next day and just do as much as you can. And that's what I love about it. I think it's really important to have races and events like that that are not exclusionary and kind of elitist, where they're like, if you're not the best of the best, you can't do it. And if you fail on day one, then you're out and you've just spent a year of your life or 6 months of your life training for this thing and you just got to fly home. That's pretty miserable. But this is a good one, and I've done this one twice before in shorter iterations, and it's always been amazing.
And how do you begin to train for that?
Well, early. Start soon. It's a lot of building mileage, so just like your weekly mileage, and then learning how to do back-to-back long runs. I am not, so I think I've got something like post-viral fatigue. So I'm having to be really careful about my training for this training block. It was what stopped me on my previous training block when I was training for an 100K earlier this year. But like theoretically, it's about basically building up your legs and your cardiovascular system, your base like aerobic fitness, to be able to withstand really long days on your feet outdoors back to back. You don't even have to necessarily get good at running a lot of that, because you can just spend a lot of that time hiking. But if you can't spend that amount of time on feet, like 8, 10, 12 hours on your feet, then you're going to start to really struggle. And that doesn't mean that you're doing 8, 10, 12 hours training, but by doing those back to back, like 3.5 hour runs, you're basically training your body to be able to perform whilst also very fatigued. So yeah, it's a slow build up. I'm currently on 60 kilometers a week, which is nowhere near obviously what I'm going to be doing, but it's 60 kilometers a week of running plus a lot of gym work, strength work to reduce the breakdown of my muscles as I'm running, a lot of hiking, dog walks, like 25,000 steps a day. I think it's been for the last 2 weeks, I think I was basically 20,000 steps a day on average. So yeah, it's a lot. It's not surprising. I've been really tired recently, but I'm actually really enjoying it, and it's been up to the last couple of weeks. A really nice summer as well. So yeah, really good to get out.
You touched on it there, but what would you consider the importance of strength training to any runners?
I mean, I am always going to advocate for strength training. I think it is so important, and more so if you're doing trail running and ultra running, because trails stress your muscles in quite different ways to what road running does. Road running is very much monotonous, and you can get strong for road running by doing a lot of road running, and the same with trails. But if you're going up and down hills, basically you're putting up to 4 times your body weight through each leg as you're running on those hills. So that is a huge amount of weight. Well, that's like over 200 kilos per leg that they're having to put up with. So by building up that strength in the gym and building up the capacity, you're basically less likely to injure yourself. And with really, really long ultra runs, it's not necessarily about your fitness, it's about your resilience to degradation. Basically, it's like a war of attrition, and if you can reduce the amount that your body starts to suffer, and your ligaments and your tendons and your muscles, then you can go a lot further, because you can just walk it in. But if your muscles are completely inflamed and incapable of recovering from day to day, then you're going to struggle a lot more than if you have really strong muscles. And no amount of running training, I think, is going to make up for that strength that you can build in the gym.
Completely. And do you have a coach setting your training?
So I'm currently using an app, which is incredible. I'm kind of shocked because I used to have a coach and she is just like fount of all knowledge. Like she knows absolutely everything. But as everyone who's had a coach will know, coaches are very expensive. And I kind of wanted to have a personalized training plan. So I started to use Runner, Runna, which is an app that basically you put in your current like ability and your current time, say for a 5K or a 10K, you put in what you're training for, what the date of the race is, and it builds you a training program. And you can say, I can run 3 days a week, 4 days a week, 5 days a week, up to 7 days a week. You can put in the days that you can run, and you can put in whether or not you want strength training as well, and it will come up with a strength training program for you as well. And then it sets up your schedule. So this is a 16-week training program, and it will give me the runs and the sessions from everything from like recovery runs to my long runs to my interval training sessions with exact paces, etc. So I'm actually super impressed with it. I do find that it errs on the side of high mileage, and I'm very much a low mileage runner because I do so much walking and so much strength work, and so I have had to shift some things around, but it is really good. And it's a relatively new app, and I think they're changing things all the time and improving it all the time. I mean, even in the time that I've been running it, so I got my 10K PB with it last winter, and their road running programs are like spot on, but this is my first time using it for an ultra, so yeah, I'm really interested to see how it goes.
Yeah, no, that's really great that the technology is so advanced that you can
Yeah,
do road running, you can incorporate the strength training, and
yeah,
you use Whoop as well. How does that enhance your training and optimize it? It's such a big
yeah.
hype. Is it worth it?
Whoop is a bit of a hype, but I'm completely obsessed with it. I, as
Is that
someone
your
who
Whoop band there?
all day posing, yeah, no, I absolutely love it. I've got my Garmin and my Whoop. I am a complete like tech, not even tech, just data nerd. I really love numbers, and whilst I don't think it ever replaces like listening to your body, obviously, I think it is really useful to have that data to back up how you're feeling. So for me, primarily, I use it for the recovery metrics. So so last week, prime example, I started feeling fatigued, looked at my Whoop. My Whoop tells me my resting heart rate is up, my heart rate variability is down. That's a sign of being a little bit overtrained, or at least still fatigued from your previous training sessions. If you're not recovering how you should then start to like wind things back a little bit, because it means that your body is struggling to recover from those training sessions. You're not even benefiting of the training sessions if you continue to push through. So I looked at that. That was one day. So I did just an easy run on that day. And then the next day, again, heart rate variability down, resting heart rate up. So that shows that I've still not recovered despite doing a slightly easier day the day before. So that's when I start to take rest. And you can listen to your body, but when you have a training program telling you to do X, Y, and Z, and that you should be able to manage X, Y, and Z, it's sometimes quite difficult, especially for us type A people, to actually take a step back and be like, well, yes, the training program says that, but my body says, actually, you know what, nah, like we don't want to do that right now. And so to have the data to say, actually, yeah, sure, your body says you're under recovered, maybe slightly overtrained, or you're getting ill, is really helpful, because then it's so much easier to listen to because you've got the data to back up exactly how you're feeling. And lo and behold, after 3 days of extra rest and recovery and just easy runs or literally just doing nothing, I've had the lowest resting heart rate and the highest heart rate variability I've had in, I don't know, probably about a year as of yesterday morning. So it's really nice to see. And it also gives you direct feedback about the consequences of your actions, whether that is taking some extra rest days or having a couple of extra glasses of wine at night or taking a late night or having a really busy day and stressful day at work. Like it all contributes to the recovery or lack thereof of your body, and you get the data to back that up, and I find that really valuable. I do have for Runner and Whoop, so I'm a Whoop and Runner ambassador, just in the interest of disclosure. I have discount codes for both of them. So for Runner, if you want to get 2 weeks to actually just test it out for free, use the code Flora. And then you can like test it out. If you don't love it, you don't have to use it. But I think for anyone who's training for who's going to be training for a spring marathon, congratulations if you got into London Marathon, by the way. um, you can basically like check out their plans and then decide if you want to use that. And then for Whoop, it's just join.whoop.com/Flora, and then that gets you a month free and the actual band for free as well. I rate them both. I do think they're really good. I wouldn't work with them otherwise because, you know, I look like a bit of an idiot wearing both of these, but I
I'm
do
actually wearing them as well, so
yeah, yeah. I mean, I wear them all the time. I also use this as a heart rate monitor. So the heart rate monitor in wrist-based watches is not like not brilliant. So I literally undo this and I put it up on my bicep, and then it acts as a heart rate sensor, and it's significantly more accurate than on the wrist. So,
completely. On
yeah.
the wrist, sometimes you look at it and you're like, seriously? Or you're like, seriously?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's why I did it, because I was like, I started doing zone 2 heart rate training for the beginning of this training block, and I was like, every time I go out for a run it says I'm at 170, and I just know that that's bollocks, and it was picking up my cadence, not my heart rate. And as soon as I switched it to my Whoop, which now transmits to my Garmin so I can actually see it on my Garmin, as soon as I switched to that, I realized that actually it was bullshit, and it's just lying to me.
Listen to your body, I guess, is the important thing as well. Within ultra running, what do you think the gap is like between male and female performance? There's been quite a lot of discussion on that. It's super interesting.
It's so interesting, and the science behind it is amazing. I do think we're lacking case studies, because there are still so many more men than women who take part in these things. But even if you look at, you know, the women that we do have, you look at Courtney Dauwalter setting just endless world records and winning races outright constantly, and you look at like Camille Herron, and I mean, there are so many women who are just absolutely incredible at ultra running. And the longer the distance, the closer the difference between men and women is, until you get to things like, I think it's 250 miles or something, where women start to overtake men because of our ability to metabolize fat. And that's a really interesting phenomenon, because I think we're told that women are just weaker men, and oh, it just turns out we've not been running far enough. And when you look at the really extreme long races, the gap between the men and the women's times are much, much, much closer. If not, the women have overtaken the men. And I think that the only reason that there are still races where the women haven't overtaken the men for those extreme long endurance races is because not enough women are actually doing ultramarathon running. Not enough women are seeing it as a viable career choice, which is understandable when you look at, you know, prize money and ultra running. It's like this. It's very minimal. It's nothing like running marathons at all. It has to be, I mean, currently it's literally the hobby of the already wealthy, pretty much, because there is no prize money in it. And it takes a huge amount of time and takes you away from, you know, family and work and all that. So I think it's an exciting time to be in the world of ultra running. I think big things are going to be happening over the next few years.
And equally, the age of the demographic of the people who do ultra running, there's been some really interesting statistics that you almost peak with your ultra running later than you would do with marathon running, like even like 39, 40, 41, which is quite old for an elite sport like that, especially ultra running, which is just quite epic. What your thoughts on that, if you notice the demographic?
Absolutely. I'm not super young, but I do find that I am one of the youngest in ultra running. Less so recently. I feel like there's a new wave of female ultra runners coming into the fore who are, you know, in their early 20s and stuff. I'm 28, so I'm not exactly old, but I previously was by far the youngest person, and less so now. But it's really encouraging when you look at the statistics of ultra runners, female ultra runners especially. You get better and better and better as you get older, because with ultra running, it's not about one training block. It's not about a 16-week cycle or even about a year of racing. It is about having decades of running under your belt. And also with ultra running, especially as you get longer, it's less about how strong and how fit you are, and more about how you can tackle adversity and how you can problem solve on the move. And that's a skill. That skill comes with practice. And you only get that practice through years and decades of trying. And I think a lot of women of, maybe in their mid 30s think they're way too old to start up a new sport. And I'm like, no, try ultra running. You're young. Trust me, you're young for this sport. And you look at like Nikki Spinks, for example. I don't know how old she is, maybe in her 60s. I don't want to overage her, but she has been in this sport and there's such longevity in it. She's been in the sport for so long, winning races and competing at a really high level for ages. And that's the great thing, you look at sprinters and they'll probably peak in their early 20s. And it's very much completely different with ultra running. If you're in your early 20s, you may be doing your first marathon or something. And then you can build from there. But it's great. I really like it. It's really encouraging. It kind of flips the narrative of like men are better than women, strength is always better, and younger is better than older. It flips all of that on its head. And I think that's a really exciting sport to be part of.
Absolutely. It screams to me like inclusive. Like it's just everybody there and everyone's there together. And when you're going over those distances, there'll be such a rapport between you all. Like you're all in it together, and it's not like you're gonna be just looking at your Garmin and sprinting up the hill away from someone who needs an extra gel or something.
Yeah, a
It's
100%.
yeah.
And like I say, the running community is so friendly. There's still work to be done on inclusivity. The people who you see on the trails, like I say, are the people who can afford to spend all of that time on the trails. And especially when you look at races like UTMB that require however many races to be done in order to even qualify for entering that race. You're looking at thousands and thousands of pounds spent on training, racing, travel, etc., etc. It's not inclusive in that sense. But when you're just looking at trail running and your local races, and there are so many good local races, yeah, it's a lot better. But there's still work to be done. But I also do think it's relatively small and new to the mainstream. People have been doing it for a very long time, but not your
Cool
average.
now.
Yeah, it's super cool. I'm super cool, which is like maybe the first time ever.
And I guess the mental resilience element of it, at what point does that actually outweigh the physical endurance? Like mentally, you just have to keep going.
Yeah, it depends on the day. Like if I'm having a really good time, I don't have to have any mental resilience at all, and I can just be smiling my whole way through an ultra. That happens less and less now as I push myself further and further, and then it becomes all about like just don't quit. And that's all about mental resilience, and that's something that you train through the training sessions that you do. Like say you're kind of exhausted from your Sunday long run, and then it gets to Tuesday and you've got to do your interval session. That is where your mental resilience comes in, because you don't necessarily want to get out the door, but then you get out the door and then you go to the track and then you hit your paces, and you're building all that time, you're building that mental resilience that's going to come in handy when you actually get to those races. And that is then applicable to the rest of your life. I mean, if you can do that, you can do anything. And it's such a cliche, but I think it is really important to say that it genuinely does change your life.
Yeah, it builds up mental resilience not only in the running, but when you're at the end of a long day and you've run out of milk in the fridge and you've got to go out again. Do you know little things like that? You're like, well,
Yeah, 100%.
I ran 225k. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, that thing, like everyone just saying like, oh, I really can't be bothered. I have so much bother to give now. Like I can do things that previously I was just way too, I just was so lazy, and now I'm like, well, it's extra steps, it's extra
I
training.
actually love that quote. I have so much bother to give. I think it just sums it up.
Yeah.
Oh, that's amazing. And so you've got a large online following on several different platforms. How do you deal with that if you've said, right, I'm going to do this ultra? Do you feel like performance anxiety and pressure from, you almost have created a bigger audience of people for you, like watching you?
Yeah, definitely. Especially if people can track me, it's always sort of in the back of my head as I'm racing. Usually I know what's best for me and I know what's best for my body. There have been times when I haven't DNS'd, so did not start, when I probably should have not done the race, because I knew that there was a lot riding on that race, a lot of people watching, a lot of people wanting to see how my training had gone, etc., etc. And that happened earlier this year when I had this 100K across the Lake District. I had been ill, really ill, and then injured, and then ill again, which meant that I'd missed out literally over half of my training program. So I started the race. You can't do an 100K on fumes. Like, there was just no way that I was really ever going to complete it. But I started because I did feel like there was quite a lot of pressure for me to do so. That's not other people's fault. That's very much all just up in my head, that, like, if I'd said, you know, I can't start this race because I've done literally 6 weeks of a 16-week training program, people have been like, sensible decision. But I decided to do it anyway. And to be fair, I had a great time, but I wasn't ready for the race, and it did put me out for, you know, only a couple of weeks. It wasn't too bad, but it put me out for a couple of weeks, and I didn't finish. I DNF'd at 60 kilometers in, which again, if I'd actually felt the pressure from people to perform to a bigger extent, I probably would have tried to push through, and then I would have ended up actually really injured and really ill, which would have been very unhelpful. So thankfully, I don't really let it get to me that much. And like I said, you know, I have been doing Instagram for 13 years. There has been a long period of time where I can manage how I respond to the online world. And because I've kind of grown up with it, it no longer, I mean, it doesn't control, you know, how I live my life. But there is an element of pressure, especially if I set out, for example, with a road race to complete a particular goal. You know, like when I was training for a sub 20-minute 5 kilometer, I didn't get it on my first go, and that frustrated me, not just for myself because I still got a massive PB, but because I knew that other people would be watching, and I didn't want to disappoint people, but also I wanted to prove that I could do it. And actually 3 weeks later or something, I went back and I did it, and got 3 seconds under 20 minutes, which it all
It's
counts.
under 20. It's under 20. I guess a huge part of your mental resilience training is probably 13 years on Instagram.
Yeah.
You're like, this is fine.
You're probably right. A lot of people on the internet are great, but some people are not so great.
Mm-hmm.
And even
Curate
just
your feed. Curate your feed.
yes, exactly. But you know, when you put yourself out there, people assume that because you're on the internet, you're happy to receive a certain amount of hate, and that's not true. I mean, that is like the epitome of victim blaming, you know. Like, should we all just not be on the internet simply because we don't want to receive abuse from people that we don't know? No. Like, half the world is on the internet, but that doesn't mean that they deserve to receive hate messages or whatever. And that's something I feel very strongly about, something that I know that every single online content creator has received. So yeah, it's depressing. There are some pretty awful people out there, but I always try to say to them, like, there's a certain amount of changing people's minds that you can try to do. Like, if someone just thinks you're a shitty person, though, like, they are hell bent on making you that shitty person in their mind, and there's nothing that you can do to change their mind. Even if you met up with them and had a conversation, they think you're an awful person, and at that point it's a block and remove them from your page, in the same way that you could avoid someone on the street if they were shouting at you and shouting abuse at you, which is unacceptable, and yet we seem to accept it on social media. So yeah, block, remove yourself from the situation, protect your mental health. I think that's so important.
Absolutely. And apart from the distance, what would you say the main differences are between running, say, a 10-kilometer race and an ultra race? What are the differences?
So many differences. You get to eat more in an ultra. The prime reason why I do it. You don't have any time constraints or time goals. If you say 10K road race, most people kind of know what a good time for a 10K is. Most people would not have any clue what a good time for a hilly 50K is. Even in the same race between 2 different years, there's no way that you can predict, you know, what time you're going to get, because if the conditions are different, it's a completely different race, which you don't really get in road running. The mentality is a little bit different as well. You're going out for a nice day on the trails. You're just having a good time, eating lots of food. It's a moving picnic, as we like to call it. It's completely different from the 10K. 10K is an all-out effort for 40, 45 minutes, an hour, whatever. So yeah, whereas there is very little all-out effort involved in ultra running, except for just trying to get you to the end.
And do you have any horror stories from any races? Any
Oh yeah.
nutrition gone wrong, or what's the worst thing that springs to mind?
You know what? Because I've not been doing it for that long, I don't have all the stories, but I do have some good ones. Not least last year's Tribe Run for Love, where I basically we were fed well water, water from the wells as part of the aid stations, which I hadn't brought a filter bottle because we weren't told that we needed to, and it basically like really ruined my stomach and everyone else's. Like everyone suffered from this, and I literally couldn't run without needing to duck behind a tree every sort of 10-15
The
minutes.
glamour of sport.
It was awful. And then I couldn't eat, which, as we know, in ultra running, especially when you're on day 3 or 4 of a multi-day ultra marathon, eating is key because you're like thousands of calories in deficit. So you really, really need to eat. And then I couldn't eat. And then I started day 4, I don't know, maybe 3,000 calories down or something. And I needed to get to the end of a 50-kilometer day, having done already 120 something kilometers in 3 days previously. And I tried not to eat anything because I knew every time I ate, I would need to go to the loo, and not the good loo. And I basically bonked, which is when you run out of glycogen stores in your muscles. And I needed to, I mean, I literally couldn't move. I couldn't use my muscles. They simply would not contract. And I had to have a nap at the bottom of a hill, mountain, in fact. And yeah, I lay down for 20 minutes. And in hindsight, it was pretty dangerous because there are bears, wolves, lynxes, snakes. This is in Croatia. All sorts of things that want to potentially cause harm, not least people. But actually, it ended up being fine. I had a gel once I woke up, and that just got me all the way to the end. I mean, it literally revitalized me. I mean, it was, my body was so low on glucose that I had this one gel, which would usually get me through like half an hour of running, and it got me 2 hours. It was like 12 kilometers, 10 kilometers until the end, which literally did take 2 hours. It got me that 2 hours to the end, and it, yeah, completely, like, it was amazing.
You need to write a review for that gel company. That's such a roller coaster. What gel?
I
What
know.
company was it?
It was High Five. It had caffeine in it as well, which I think might have been the game changer for me.
Yeah.
Don't recommend caffeine if you already need to poo yourself, but
Yeah, I was going to say that's a risky game.
it was all a risky game. It was literally either that or literally lying there and calling
Yeah.
the mountain rescue out because I couldn't get anywhere. Genuinely,
You're
I
not advocating the sport here, Flora.
was great. Very much. That was that. I think that might have been verging on type 3 fun, but the rest of it was also in my vlog of this experience, where you do see me crying on the side of a mountain. I did also say I feel like this is a beautiful place to die. So, you know, there are perks.
Oh
As
man,
um,
amazing.
yeah, lots of things. There was another one as well where I did this race recently, earlier this year, which was during the time, and I didn't realize this at the time, but I had quite a serious internal infection, and I felt really awful in the lead up to this race. So I just took loads of rest days, and then I arrived at the race. It was snowing. There was this much snow on the ground. It was in the Brecon Beacons, Banau Brycheiniog, which is what it's called now, and it was 30 kilometers or something, like nothing insane, but 32 kilometers, that was it. But very, very hilly, very tough race. And my heart rate for the entire thing was over 180. And basically, I got to the end, struggled to even form a coherent sentence, and went to the doctor the next day, had to be put on 2 different types of antibiotics, codeine, and basically told to not exercise for the next 2 weeks or do anything. Like I was literally like hallucinating. It was really bad. So don't do a race when you're ill is the
Yeah.
moral of the story.
This is a strange link, but having gotten to where you are now, what advice would you give to anyone considering ultra running?
Don't do a race when you're ill. I don't know. There's so much advice that I could give. I think the primary thing is to follow what's fun for you. Whether you love, being in the mountains, or you prefer, a flat river trail, or whatever it is, don't get caught up in what people say or you think that people think is an impressive run or whatever. Just do what you love, and if you love it, you're going to do a lot more of it. I think that's so important. For me personally, I feel like I need to up the distance of what I'm doing. You know, my single day races, 50K is not enough anymore. Now I have to do 50 miles or 100K or 100 miles. But actually, I really love doing 50Ks, and 50K is still a pretty epic distance. And I think it's really important to just follow your heart, especially if you're not doing it as a job. What is the benefit in doing something that you're not loving? I mean, we do this for fun. So go out and have fun.
And 3 off the cuff reasons why you would advocate ultra running. 3 quick things.
Oh, quick.
Well, it
Sorry.
doesn't have to be quick. No, no.
Okay. 3 quick things why you should do ultra running. It will change your brain, the way that your brain works. Everything will suddenly seem much easier, because ultra running is really hard. Secondly, the community is incredible, and there is so much of it out there. If you just speak to people, everyone's so friendly. I love it. It's so good. Thirdly, why would you? Oh, food. Yes, so much food. Endless food. It's just like, why would you not?
Absolutely. Those are 3 great reasons. And with your social media, just any advice to people pursuing a career in online content creation?
I think basically the same with ultra running. Focus on what you enjoy. There's no point putting content out there that causes you to stress and worry that you're not doing it right, etc., etc. Just put content out there. Put out the content that you enjoy creating. People will come if they also enjoy the same things. And post regularly. Doesn't have to be frequently, but regularly at the very least. So, 3 times a week or something. Use hashtags, do good quality photos, all the usual stuff. But primarily, if the enjoyment comes through, people will follow.
Authenticity, back at it.
All the way.
And what is your favorite place to run in the world?
2 different places. Primarily, probably the Alps, just because of the variety of trails. And I finished a race there last year, and the thing that hurt the most at the end was my cheeks from smiling so much. So I think that's a good sign.
Quite an impressive sign, to be honest.
And then in the UK, I think there's so much in the UK that we just don't do enough of. Like, we have so much on our doorstep. There's a part of the Southwest Coast Path down in Dorset between Lyme, Regis, and Seaton, called the Undercliffs Path. It is 8 miles of fun. It is extremely difficult. It's like a jungle under there. It's got its own little microclimate because it's a cliff that's done a landslide. The history of it's super interesting, but most of all, like, the trail is just epic. So yeah, if you can get down there, do. It's absolutely gorgeous.
There's so many places in the UK you can just explore with running. So many beautiful places that people don't actually realise, and lots of hills.
Absolutely. So, oh yeah, the Undercliffs Path is very hilly.
Amazing. And where can people find you if they want to follow you?
So I am on social media on Instagram at Food Fitness Flora. From my Instagram, you can find all my other channels. The link is in my bio, but I also have TikTok, which is just Flora Beverley, YouTube, which is also just Flora Beverley, which is my name. I have a blog, which is foodfitnessflora.blog, where I do put some of my writing. I also write for some other publications like Trail Runner Mag and Eco Age, bunch of different stuff. But if you just type me in on Google, it should come up.
And you've got your codes as well for Whoop and the Runner app. That they sound amazing. The technology is so advanced, and if you can run that far with it, I think that's quite a good you're quite a good advocate for it. You prove it.
Yeah, it's definitely hard wearing because I don't treat any of my kit very well.
It's just been great to catch up with you, Flora. I feel like we could have talked for many hours about lots of different things. Yeah, and I mean, you must have very, very strong mental resilience to be able to do that. And I wish you well with your big race as well, and looking forward to seeing how you get on with that.
Thank you so much. It's been delightful. Thank you.